Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 197, The McGaw Brothers. I came across the McGaw family where one of their members, after passing away, had their probate placed in the papers and they were noted as a rich squatter. John Thoburn McGaw and Margaret Guthrie were married in Ulster, Ireland in 1825 and they had 4 children. In 1856, Ferrymount Farm was the home of Joseph McGaw, his mother Margaret, sister Eliza and brother William John, his father John having died in 1836. Sunnyside Farm next door was home to his uncle William and cousin Mary, and next to them was Century Hill, home to William Fee McKinney. 2 doors away again lived one of the Wilson families. Of these 3 families, the Wilsons first immigrated to Australia in 1838, followed by Joseph McGaw in 1856 and the McKinneys from 1880. So 2 of the sons of John Thoburn McGaw and Margaret Guthrie, Joseph and William, immigrated to Australia and obtained pastoral holdings in the Murrumbigee District. The eldest son, William John McGaw, was born on the 3rd of October 1834 at Carnmoney in County Antrim, Northern Ireland. He arrived in Melbourne on board the Ocean Express from Liverpool on the 11th of June 1865 when he was 30. He had a relationship with Susanna Christian, an Aboriginal woman, and they had a son late in 1867 or early 1868 on the Murrumbidgee River, most probably at Tubbo Station. This child was called James Shaw. Thomas departed Victoria in January 1870 and travelled to Ireland to marry Sarah McKinney on the 24th of May 1870. And it says in 1871, Miss McKinney left Ireland for Australia and the young couple were married and went to live on Pomingallina near Wagga, the station that Mr McGaw was managing. In 1872, Stanbridge, Waugh and McGaw bought Cuba Station near Darlington Point and Mr and Mrs McGaw resided there. In a tour to the south, a series of articles published in 1872 in the Town and Country Journal, written by an anonymous correspondent, it mentions another property owned by the McGaw brothers. Shortly after 7, we reached Murrumbigee, the station residence of McGaw and Company. If not the finest, Murrumbigee House is one of the finest in the Riverina. It has a spacious and lofty interior with a veranda partially surrounding it. The garden and shrubbery deserves more than a passing notice. The ground is arranged with considerable taste, and a vine trellis-worked avenue runs in the form of a cross in the centre, providing a great boon in the heat of summer. The kitchen, stores, blacksmiths and carpenter's shop, overseers and men's quarters, stables, coach houses and other outbuildings make up the Murrumbigee township. Murrumbigee is said to be a compound Aboriginal word and is translated as burra, meaning quick, and bogey, to swim. The area of Murrumbigee is 500 square miles and its frontage to the Murrumbidgee is 20 miles. It is all fenced in and has on it upwards of 250 miles of fencing, which costs £50 to £80 per mile. Large sums have been expended in obtaining water supply, and incredible as it may appear, the present spirited proprietors have expended in improvements upwards of £27,000 in 4.5 years. The station carries upwards of 130,000 sheep. The superior character of these may be judged by a glance at the sideboard of Murrumbigee, which is well filled with silver cups and champion prizes obtained at the Riverina Pastoral Show. Says the larger paddocks are now in course of subdivision, so it's probable that before the end of the year, 400 miles of fencing will have been completed. Several of these paddocks are watered by the Murrumbidgee, the others by dams and wells. 24 dams at a cost of over £6,000 and 14 wells at a cost of over £7,000 have been constructed on Murrumbigee. Several stud rams have been imported at long prices, as high as £210 being paid for one animal. In addition to the sheep, there is also a small herd of 200 choice cattle. A portion of the station is set apart for a stud farm where the pure merino sheep and shorthorn cattle are kept. An addition has lately been made to the cattle stock by the purchase of a bull from the Nepean Towers herd at a cost of 400 guineas.
A boiling down establishment is also erected, capable of melting 2,000 to 3,000 sheep per week. This has not been used for several years, but it is said is likely to start shortly, as in the opinion of many stockholders, fat stock is rapidly reaching boiling down price in that part of the colony. 2 steam engines are constantly employed on the station, sawing timber for the numerous improvements going on and in raising water for the use of stock. The station is worked on an excellent plan. Besides the head station, there are 8 outstations and 20 accommodation huts for the people employed. The station requires about 50 constant hands, independent of the men employed by the contractors in fencing and dam making. At shearing time, 200 men are employed. Shearers, shepherds and others define Murrumbigee as the swell place of that part of Riverina. And there is a sketch of Murrumbigee Station at this time, so in 1875, that was sketched by Mr. F.A. Franklin. William McGaw was made a magistrate on the 22nd of June 1881. On the 12th of July 1888, it mentions in the Hay Riverine Grazier the Cuba Ball. Cuba, the residence of the McGaw brothers, has been the scene of high revel for some time back. The mansion has lately been finished and furnished with every modern convenience and extensive gardens laid out. During the 3rd week in June, the McGaw brothers entertained what was called in that celebrated Victorian dispatch all the wealth, talent and intelligence of the colony. Early in the following week, the hearts of the selectors whose holdings are on Jondarran, Cuba and Benarambra were flattered extremely by the reception of sundry missives which on being opened revealed cards bearing the following delightful inscription: Mrs. William McGaw requests the pleasure of Mr. and Mrs. Company on Friday on the 29th for tea at 6 o'clock, dancing. On the day of the event, it was breezy and bright, with clouds scudding across the June sun, an exquisite day. We were met at the entrance to the grounds by W. and J. McGaw, who ushered us to our respective dressing rooms, where we crossed the carpeted path to the hall, at the door of which we were received with grace and courtesy by Mrs. William McGaw, not the least tinge of patronage being mingled with the cordiality of her reception. When we entered the dining room, many of the guests were already at tea. The arrangement of the table was in itself a picture, an artistic study, the lines of the cardinal satin on the white damask having a brilliant effect, admirably aided by the mellow light of the fairy lamps and 2 handsome bronze ones with rose-coloured shades. Immediately after tea, we adjourned to the ballroom, a spacious iron structure beautifully lighted with immense Chinese lanterns of elegant designs and a brilliant array of candles. The floor was delightful. In each corner of the room was a large pine loaded with hanging lamps of various colours, whilst a table for refreshments extended across the supper end. Close beside this was a piano which did good service throughout the night, as well as the violin. There were dance cards, and when supper was announced, all re-entered the dining room to partake in a splendid champagne supper, during which Mr. Slattery of Broomfield proposed the health of Mr. and Mrs. McGaw in a very neat little speech. Mr. Joseph McGaw returned thanks on behalf of Mrs. W. McGaw, his brother and himself, after which dancing again resumed until daylight. Altogether, the Cuba Ball was a success. In 1891, Mr. McGaw had purchased the Maranoa home at Manly, formerly the residence of Honorary W.B. Daly, and known as Daly's Castle. In 1893, there were patent letters completed at the Patents Office for William McGaw of Cuba Station, Darlington Point, for a plough that was designed to prevent the spread of bushfires. William died on the 11th of July 1894 on Cuba Station at Whitton, and he's buried in the Narrandera Cemetery. And on the 28th of January 1895, under the heading of Wealthy Squatter, the will of the late William John McGaw, squatter of the Murrumbidgee, has been sworn in at £82,550, which he leaves to his wife. On the 23rd of April 1895, in the Hay Riverine Grazier, the partnership which existed between Joseph McGaw and William John McGaw of Cuba Station, Graziers, under the style of J. and W. J. McGaw, has been terminated owing to the death of the said William John McGaw. So the Cuba property was bought out by William's brother Joseph, and Sarah went and lived permanently at their property at Manly. She died on the 19th of May 1922 in Manly. Her obituary reads, Mrs. McGaw, aunt of Mr. J. McGinney of Nangus, died on Friday last at Manly. She was the widow of the late Mr. W. J. McGaw of Cuba Station. Mrs. McGaw, née McKinney, was born in 1842 at Century Hills, her father's estate at Carmody, Belfast, Ireland. Mr. McGaw's property joined the McKinney property in Ireland, and the deceased was engaged to Mr. W.J. McGaw before he left for Australia to make a home. In 1872, the McGaw brothers bought Cooper Station near Darlington Point, and Mr. and Mrs. McGaw resided there until his death in 1891. The Cooper estate was managed by Joseph and T.G. McKinney, nephews of Mrs. McGaw, until it was recently disposed of. William and Sarah had no children of their own. And on the 10th of August 1922, in the Jerilderie Herald and Urana Advertiser, the late Mrs. William McGaw, widow of the McGaw brothers of Cooper Station on the north of the Murrumbigee near Darlington Point, recently died, leaving an estate valued at £171,890. Among her bequests is 1/4 of the residue of her estate to go to the McGaw home connected with the Burnside orphanage near Parramatta. So in the absence of McGaw descendants willing to take their place at Cooper, several McKinney nephews came from Carmody to work on and later manage the pastoral property. When Joseph McGaw took up Cooper, it comprised of more than 90,000 acres. By 1884, the Crown Lands Act had reduced his lease holdings to a little less than 44,500 acres. This major riverina property remained in McGaw ownership under McKinney management until 1926. And a little on William Shaw's son, James Shaw. You may be wondering why James Shaw wasn't the rightful owner of the property and why it wasn't passed on to him. Well, remember that he had a child with an Aboriginal woman. In those days, Aboriginal people had no rights. They had no voting rights and they were not able to own property of their own. I don't think that William McGaw would have owned up to society that he had a son with an Aboriginal woman. It's difficult to say whether his wife, Sarah McQuinney, was aware that he had a son, but there are one or two clues that show that there seems to have been acknowledgement that it was his son, and also it seems that they did have some contact. James is recorded as living in Whitton on the 25th of November 1891 and is a billiard maker at the Royal Mail Hotel in Whitton. By 1892, James, who's commonly known as Jimmy, commenced a relationship with Annie Finley, née Bingham, who was married and already had 5 children. They went on to have 5 children together as well. On the 21st of May 1897, in the Hay Riverine Grazier, it says a man named Jimmy Shaw was staying in her mother's house at Whitton and she thought he had been doing so for 7 or 8 years. Shaw was half-caste and was not a boarder. Annie Finley, wife of George Finley and mother of Harriet Finley, stated that she was presently living with a man named Jimmy Shaw. Harriet Finley was born in Narrandera on the 15th of April 1893. The witness gave other evidence corroborative of that already given by the foregoing witnesses. She thought she was 17 when she was married. She never wanted her daughter to marry Jimmy Shaw. She never thought of such a thing. She never left her daughter alone with Shaw. Her husband knew that she was living with Jimmy Shaw. Her husband left Shaw in the house when he left 2 years ago. So in 1897, he was living at Cooper Station, and that was the information that was listed in William McGaw's probate papers. So there is a mention of Jimmy Shaw in his biological father's papers. In 1906, he's also at Cooper Station, and it mentions this in relation to subscriptions given to the Narrandera Hospital. In 1912, at Narrandera, a warrant has been issued by the Narrandera bench for the arrest of James Shaw, charged with child desertion. He is 50 years of age, 5 foot 8 inches high, stout, nuggety build, corpulent, bow-legged, grey hair, bald on top, grey moustache only, very dark eyes, large scar under jaw and extending around under the chin, very noticeable, drags his feet when walking, a quarter-caste Aboriginal, dressed in a dark tweed suit, black band on coat sleeve, brown soft felt hat with black band and light lace-up boots, a horse driver and labourer, left Whitton on the 10th, accompanied by a 3/4 caste Aboriginal woman named Florence Christian, about 21 years of age, had with them a foxhound pup, white with yellow spots. On the 19th of January 1912, it says that in the police court, James Shaw was charged on warrant with deserting his illegitimate child at Whitton on the 1st of January and was remanded for a week on bail. In 1913, he's listed as living at Whitton, and he was a rabbiter, and Annie is living in Whitton as well at this time. And Jimmy died on the 27th of April 1942 in Orange, aged 75, without a will. And now to the other McGaw brother who came out to Australia, Joseph. Joseph was born on the 7th of July 1828 at Carmany, County Antrim in Ulster, Ireland. He emigrated in 1856. He spent a year initially working as a surveyor's assistant. There are letters that were written to his mother, Margaret, his sister, Eliza, his brother, William, and his cousin, Mary. There was some written from the Royal Charter steamer on his way out to Australia in 1856, but also at surveyors' camps in Victoria in 1857. He then became an overseer for David Wilson, who managed his uncle's property, Avon Plains, in 1858. Joe eventually became manager of not only Avon Plains until 1861, but Longanong in 1861 and 1862, and then Yanco in 1862 through to December 1865. In 1861, his brother William John joined him. On the 17th of March 1864 in the Sydney Morning Herald, it mentions Mr. Joseph McGaw being on the property Gulgumbla. There was a recollection on the 4th of September 1934 in the Hay Riverine Advertiser, saying the Hay Bridge was officially opened 60 years ago by the Honorary Henry Parkes, Colonial Secretary, afterwards Sir Henry Parkes, famous in the history of Australia. The minister made the journey to Hay via Albury and Deniliquin, being driven on the last stage of his journey by the late Mr. James A. Donoghue. On his arrival here, the distinguished visitor was met by a procession of townspeople who escorted him to the Bush Inn, later known as the Commercial Hotel, where he spoke from the balcony. Whilst in the district, Honorary Henry Parkes was the guest of Mr. Joseph McGaw of Murrumbigee. So he went into partnership with his brother to own their own station, Murrumbigee east of Hay, in 1866. Some of the Yanco station hands went with him, so it indicates what a good manager he was. Joseph married Frances Hayden McNeil, known as Fanny, on the 6th of January 1869 at St Peter's, Eastern Hill in Melbourne, Victoria. He was 40 and Fanny 23. Fanny was also Irish, and they had one son and 3 daughters. In 1872, Joseph gave part of his share in his second property, Cuba, to his brother. Joseph and then John later become the sole owners of Cuba Station. Joseph owned a 2-storey family residence that was on the corner of Orrong and Belclava roads in St Kilda. It was the estate of the late William Ford, but it was previously owned by Joseph McGaw, and it was called Ford House. It's since been demolished, but I have been able to obtain a photo and wouldn't describe it as a house, I'd describe it more of a mansion. On the 11th of September 1875 in the Deniliquin Pastoral Times, it mentions the Athenaeum, and it's saying, "It is not likely to fail for want of a helping hand so long as we have such men in the district as Mr. Joseph McGaw." His last act was to hand a cheque for £25 to the Athenaeum treasurer for the building fund. And on the 9th of March 1878 in the Hay Riverine Grazier, still another name is mentioned in connection with the electorate, Joseph McGaw, Esquire of Murrumbigee. He's well known over the whole electorate by both young and old, and would in all likelihood satisfy both the Darling and the Murrumbidgee divisions of the constituency. His connection with Riverina runs through the greatest part of 20 years, and his popularity is admitted by all. He is a shrewd and practical man of business, well acquainted with the requirements of the district, and not easily diverted from his course when he has satisfied himself that he's on the right track. His return to Parliament would be unanimous, or if opposed by any courageous candidate, it would only be for the fun of the thing and without any serious hope or chance of success. And on the 20th of July 1878 in the South Australian Adelaide Observer, that the price paid for Cuba Station by Mr. Joseph McGaw, the new owner, is reported by the Telegraph to be £235,000. And on the 28th of October 1878 in the Sydney Morning Herald, one step in the right direction has been taken at last in a movement to revive the long-dormant Pastoral Association. Mr. Joseph McGaw, a large-minded Liberal and energetic squatter who was ever ready to either take the lead or modestly follow in any good work, has taken the initiative in this movement, a fact which alone inspires confidence in its success. And only 7 months later in the Hay Riverine Grazier, it talks about the Hay Pastoral Association, with the meeting of the committee being held at the Tattersalls Hotel, and Mr. Joseph McGaw is listed as one of the committee of Murrumbigee. With the problems of land legislation and a fluctuating wool industry, and added with the loss of both his sister and mother in 1877 and 1879, Joseph's health declined and he spent a few months in 1880 travelling around New Zealand. Later travels abroad suggest that he was even then on the lookout for grazing lands beyond Australia. In early 1882, Joe sold Murrumbigee and later in the year resisted the urging of the community to enter into politics. He left Cuba under the management of his brother William, and he and his wife and 4 young children moved to England in early 1883 and lived at Betchworth in Surrey. After seeing the family settled, he was off travelling again. He went to South America in 1884, Mexico and Texas in 1886, and back to Australia from 1887 to 1888, during which time he supervised the rebuilding of the Cuba homestead. And then on the 3rd of April 1890, in the Melbourne Table Talk, it says Mr Joseph McGaw of Betchworth, Surrey and Melbourne, Victoria, has joined the board of Dalgety and Company. In 1892, he returned to Argentina to set up a partnership in a sheep and cattle station called Huon with Andrew Lemont, the former stud breeder, on Groongle Station in New South Wales. He continued to supervise the management of that property from his home in Surrey, England, until he died on the 14th of May 1898 in Dorking, Surrey, England at the age of 69. Fanny died on the 12th of September 1912 in Middlesex, England, aged 66. And in the Perth Western Australian on the 18th of May 1898 it announces the death of Joseph McGaw, saying the death is announced of Mr Joseph McGaw of the London Board of Directors of Dalgety & Co. Mr Joseph McGaw was a Victorian student of Trinity College, Cambridge, and a member of the Australian Club in London. And on the 15th of June 1898, the Australasian Pastoralists Review had an obituary. Dalgety & Company have been advised by cable of the death in England of Mr Joseph McGaw, a member of the London Board of Directors of Dalgety & Company Limited and the owner of Cuba Station in the Riverina. In partnership with his late brother William McGaw, the deceased gentleman was the owner of those well-known stations, Murrumbigee and Cuba. The former station was sold some years ago to Mr Fitzwilliam Wentworth for £440,000. The brothers McGaw retained Cuba, Mr William McGaw being the resident partner. The latter, however, died some years ago, and the management of the property was vested to Mr George Mayer of Groongle, who acted for many years as Mr McGaw's attorney in Australia, who, with Mr W.B. Wilkinson of Wilkinson and Lavender, is executor in the estate. The deceased gentleman had resided in England for the past 15 or 16 years, but is well remembered in Australia for his many sterling qualities and his amiable disposition. And in the Perth West Australian on the 12th of July 1898, the amount of duty paid in regard to the estates of deceased persons last week was £12,991, of which amount the estate of the late Mr Joseph McGaw of Cuba Station contributed £12,506. The value of the estate for purposes of probate was sworn in at £250,115. And on 30th of September 1920, in the New South Wales Wellington Times, big sale at Narrandera. On the 11th of October, Wilkinson and Lavender and Dalgety & Co. will sell at Cuba, Narrandera, 200 Cuba horses and 200 cattle, 40,000 Cuba Station sheep in the estate of the late Mr Joseph McGaw. The whole flock is being sold, and as the breed is so well known to sheepmen, comment is unnecessary. And the children of Joseph McGaw, the firstborn was Edith Josephine McGaw, who was born in 1870 in Collingwood, Victoria. She returned with her family to England and remained single until she was 68, when she married Robert William Phillip in London in 1938. The announcement was in the Sydney Morning Herald of their marriage. Distinguished physician married. Sir Robert Phillip, the distinguished Scottish physician, has married Miss Edith Josephine McGaw, eldest daughter of the late Joseph McGaw of New South Wales. His first wife died in April 1937. Edith died on the 20th of February 1939 in Edinburgh, Scotland, and in the Brisbane Telegraph it announced her death. The death has occurred of Lady Phillip, widow of Sir Robert Phillip, formerly physician to the King of Scotland. Lady Phillip, who was Sir Robert's second wife, was married only last year and was the daughter of the late Joseph McGaw of Cuba, New South Wales. Their second child, Joseph Jr., was born on the 13th of August 1872 at Murrumbigee Station, and his birth was announced in the Melbourne Australasian. His birth was registered at Hay, New South Wales. He returned to England with his parents and married Pauline Blanche Tate, and they had 5 children. On the 14th of July 1931, the Sydney Morning Herald wrote, "Artists from New South Wales." Artists from New South Wales contributed some excellent work to this year's Paris Sales. John Thoburn McGaw of Hay, who's lived in England for many years, exhibited delightful watercolour sketches. His work is well known in England, where he's president of the Association of Sussex Artists and a member of the Ridley Art Club and London Faculty of Arts, whose exhibitions he contributes regularly. He's the son of the late Joseph McGaw, who was well known in both Sydney and Melbourne. And John McGaw Jr. died on the 21st of April 1952 at Horsham, Sussex, England, at the age of 79. The next child was Constance Emily Fanning McGaw, who was born on the 30th of August 1874 in St Kilda. Her birth was announced in the Melbourne Argus. She married Aubrey Trevor Lawrence in Surrey, England in 1901, and they had 3 children. Aubrey was a barrister, and in 1911 they were living in Sussex with a domestic nurse and a nursemaid to assist their first 2 children, who were 6 and 3 at the time. And Constance died on the 9th of July 1957 at Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, England, aged 82. The next child was Madeline Frances Honor McGaw, born on the 24th of January 1879 in St Kilda, and her birth was announced on the 29th of January 1879 in the Hay Riverine Grazier. McGaw at View Hill, Balaclava Road, St Kilda, the wife of Joseph McGaw, a daughter. Madeline married Herbert Arthur Baker at Lancaster Gate, England, and the marriage was announced in the Melbourne Arena Sun paper. The marriage of Mr H. Arthur Baker, son of Sir John Baker of North End House, Portsmouth, to Miss Madeline McGaw, daughter of the late Joseph McGaw of New South Wales, is to take place on the 6th of June in London. They had 2 children. Herbert was also a barrister, but by 1911 was living by private means. They were living at Frensham in Surrey and had a cook and a housekeeper, a parlourmaid and a house parlourmaid. And Madeline died on the 30th of September 1954 at Weybrook House, Haslemere, Surrey, aged 75. So it seems the McGaw brothers did very well for themselves in that period of Australia's history where sheep were very much the way in which you could earn a very, very good living.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.